Woke up this morning from the strangest dream. I was in the biggest army the world has ever seen. We were marching as one on the road to the Holy Grail.
All right, thank you and welcome to Stephan Tual, who is responsible for communications on the Ethereum Project. Stephan, thank you for making the time to speak to the Melbourne Meetup.
Oh, you're welcome, thank you. Hello everyone, although I can't see you.
We'll take a photo and post it up. You'll see,
Yes,
see
please.
all of their smiling faces.
I look forward to it.
Starting with some general questions, Stephan, what is the current status of the Ethereum project and what's the sort of timetable of expected deliveries?
Sure thing. So at the moment, we're about to release POC 3.5, so a proof of concept client 3.5 in both a Go version as well as a C++ version of the client code base. That will include changes that Vitalik has talked about, in fact, on the blog today, with the introduction of message calls and the introduction of this concept of gas, which is a new way to think about how contracts are running and fed. In terms of the bigger picture timeline, we're looking at trying to issuing a new proof of concept at least every month. So far we've been pretty good. I mean, POC 1 was at the beginning of the month, POC 2 same thing, POC 3 same thing. POC 3.5, if it's not going to be called POC 4, will be around early April, and we'll continue on that cycle. We reckon there's going to be up to 6 POC. At which point we probably want to start work on a 1.0 type build. POC 5 is going to be particularly cool because it's going to introduce this concept of GUIs. So you'll be able to build a GUI for your distributed application in order to not rely just purely on the client and having, say, a web server serving a decentralized exchange. That doesn't make much sense because you're still relying on the centralized entity of the web server. So we'll provide GUI tools initially in potentially QML and HTML5, CSS3. So people can build beautiful GUI interface. They're also decentralized by making them available through a BitTorrent and a DHT type model. For now, we haven't finalized this concept yet, but for now we're thinking BitTorrent. And hopefully, in terms of the very long-term timeline, a release around Q4 of this year.
Right. Okay, well that's a great detailed summary of where things are heading. Thank you.
Yeah. Sorry, I always go into an awful lot of detail.
No, I think people appreciate it. The other obvious question that people probably ask you all the time is about the Ether fundraising release. Can you tell us a little bit more about that and when it might happen?
So the Ether sale is going to be like a Kickstarter type project where people can purchase this product called Ether ahead of the launch, and of course that will give us the resources to acquire the talents and the required tools and so on to build Ethereum the way we imagine it to be. In terms of when that's going to take place, I don't have an exact date yet. We had to push it back a bit, as you know, from the initial February 1st, I believe, that we were talking about around that timeline. We had to do that simply for ensuring that it's done by the books in a very legal way, and that there's nothing untowardly that takes place when we try to run over this project. In terms of timelines, I don't have one. We're still looking at maybe within a month. Hopefully, we're hoping to achieve that.
Okay, great. I think there are a lot of people keen to hear about that and potentially take part. So that's good news. So on the next question I have is interestingly about legal question. Where do decentralized contracts and organizations fit in a legal sense? Do we have any idea? Is it international law or is it something completely different, or how are we viewing the way in which Ethereum will operate?
Well, I think that's a very good question. We actually have a Skype channel that's centered around Ethereum and the law. In terms of the framework within which it operates, well, I think it's almost a second state, because quite simply, if I contract with you to exchange, say, this can of Coca-Cola for the price of, say, 5 Ether, whether I give it to you or not, you probably in the real world, so to speak, you have the option to go and talk to a judge and so on and so forth. With Ethereum, potentially, we could have collateralized those assets, and so via maybe some type of escrow process, I could get my money back, say, for example, if I didn't receive the actual product. So in a sense, hopefully, a lot of those sort of micro contracts will be pretty straightforward and won't require the need for arbitration and so on. But you could imagine a framework by which arbitration is needed. So, and arbitration itself could be decentralized through a network of arbitrators, for example. And that's an interesting concept. Where does that fit within the current legal system? Well, it completely depends what you're dealing with. If you're trying to issue, I imagine, securities, just like in today's society in the United States, the SEC probably will frown upon this. And so obviously it needs to be done within the confine of your local legal system. And because Ethereum is a worldwide project, we can't really establish with 100% certainty that this action will be legal here and this action will be legal there. Ethereum ultimately, it's a programming language. It's a bit like Java. If you're going to write a code in Java, you can write a cool video game, or you could send a Mars rover on Mars, or you could write a virus.
Yes. Okay, very good. So I guess in many respects, hopefully the contracts will kind of be self-enforcing, but there may need to be this extra layer of arbitration. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So a personal question, someone, Adam, asked, what is the most exciting thing about the project for you personally, and also from what you might consider a commercial point of view?
What do you mean from a commercial point of view?
In terms of where Ethereum might lead to from a commercial business kind of role. Yeah.
So for me, I think, personally, what I'm really fascinated about is this capacity for everyone to be able to crowdfund their projects through a DSC or a DAO anywhere in the world, and issue potential the equivalent of stock and so on. So I think that's going to be incredibly liberating for a lot of people, and it has all sorts of interesting consequences on various global economies. Also, the impact it could have on things like microfinancing, peer-to-peer loans, the possibility for anyone to have access to financial derivatives, not just some elite, so to speak. I find that quite interesting. It's also very hard to tell what people are going to build with it. So because it's a programming language, just like Java again, I don't think the Java people knew that it would be used on the Mars rover, for example. And I look forward to this kind of stuff. I've heard of some very cool projects, like for example, a game economy-based layer, like in the game EVE Online, which has a fairly advanced economy. That could stay there in a sense forever, while the game engine is refreshed. The graphics maybe get better because better 3D cards and that kind of stuff. But the economy is still there in a second version of the software, and those objects that you trade within the game could also be shared with other games or other franchises of the game. I find that super fascinating. There's all sorts of ways to use Ethereum that people are, that goes way beyond just financial derivatives and the decentralized Dropbox example.
I've heard people refer to it as almost like, if you like, the App Store sort of platform that you kind of bring a lot of clever people to bring their own imagination to put something on top of it.
Yeah, that's exactly the goal.
Yeah, great. A question here from Lance about, is the Ethereum ecosystem truly trustless, or is trust transferred to the platform? And if that is the case, how do we maintain trust in Ethereum? And he says, what stops an evil genius from hacking into the system?
Right, okay, and I understand that question. It's the same thing that prevents Gavin Anderson, one of the lead developers on Bitcoin, to assign himself 20 million Bitcoins. It wouldn't work. So in terms of the platform itself, one of the big principles we have is this principle of non-discrimination. So people can run whatever code they want in any way they want. We don't control it. We have no power over it. And we do not wish to either. That's the whole point of a potentially truly free market. What stops someone from hacking? So that question could mean various different things. So there's this initial hacking the protocol itself, which would involve replacing the code on all mining machines and all nodes with this new code that assigns you 1,000,000 Ether instead of 1,000,000 Bitcoin. And that's patently impossible, just like with Bitcoin. And then there's this idea of, well, couldn't you write a virus then with a contract, since it's a programming language? And so the idea, in order to prevent this, we have this very nice sandbox, which is a virtual machine that prevents the code from escaping and doing funny stuff. And that's about 200 lines worth of code. We're going to obviously issue bounties and hire the best security experts possible to ensure that that's not the case. We also have a few surprises up our sleeve when it comes to security. And keep in mind we have Neil Koblitz also on our team, and is the co-inventor of the elliptic curve encryption that's used in Bitcoin. So how do you prevent that? Well, you get the best people at it to prevent it. Simple as that.
Great, good answer. Why is the concept of mandatory transaction fees important to Ethereum?
Oh, that's simple. If you didn't have, obviously, fees required to run contracts, then you could write a contract that's running an infinite loop. It's called the halting problem in programming terms. That is, it's impossible in theory to identify if a contract is not going to run indefinitely by just looking at it. So one way to prevent that is to make it costly to run this contract. Not costly as in too costly, but just it costs something. It can't run infinitely.
Great. Thank you. A question that I guess relates to Bitcoin and those things that are operating today that are essentially unregulated, and in some cases it seems are operated by people who don't necessarily have commercial expertise. Has there been any way of thinking about the best way to trade Ether for physical currency, and is there what is the thinking there?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's the whole point of Ethereum, isn't it? So if you take MTGOX, for example, I love that example, because with MTGOX, you're exchanging Bitcoin, which by definition is something that you have control over. So this is your funds are entirely under your control, just like cash. If you lose your wallet, if you lose your cash, that's it, it's gone. So with a bank or with an exchange like MTGOX, what you're paying for is in terms of outsourcing your security to them and saying, I trust you, MTGOX, I trust you, Mr. Bank, that A, you're going to be audited regularly, B, you're going to have the right security people on it, and C, you're going to be an honest person, and you're not going to take all my Bitcoin or all my cash, right? And guess what? Of course they disappeared, or something of the sort. Whatever happened there, I don't think we'll ever know, but bottom line, the cash is gone, right? So the idea of Ethereum is to extend this to exchanges. So you could have decentralized peer-to-peer exchanges, a bit like local Bitcoin, but even more decentralized, without the website that centralizes this transaction. And keep people in control of not only their funds, but potentially of their personal data as well. So if you had a decentralized identity system, you could keep your personal information private and only expose it when you wish to do so, just like you can spend your Bitcoin when you wish to do so. And same thing for your medical information. There's people working on projects around this type of systems where at times you may want to show other people maybe some certain medical facts about you because you think you might be afflicted with this condition and you could benefit from their insights. But at the same time, you want to retain full control over it and not give it to the NHS or medical institutions. That's the whole point of Ethereum.
Great, thank you. Is a question probably about the way in which Ethereum is still very much an idea that is difficult for a lot of people to understand, particularly from a mainstream point of view. What sort of work or thinking has gone into making Ethereum more accessible to people who aren't so technically minded, through educational material or videos?
Yeah, so at the moment, absolutely, pretty much everything is community-driven, as you know. And therefore, once we've concluded the EtherCell, we'll have the means to actually build tutorials, video guides. We're thinking about doing stuff that's similar to Code Academy, where you would have little challenges, writing contract code in HLL or LLL, and progress through the curriculum by solving these challenges. So we want everyone to use Ethereum. And anybody who's a programmer to be able to use Ethereum. That's the whole point. So yes, we'll have tutorials and things like that. For now, it's all community-driven. And the best way to learn is to follow some of the bloggers that are issuing videos on Ethereum. Look at the contract simulators because they're pretty cool. There's one by Kumavis that's beautiful with syntax highlighting. Really well worth the time looking at that. And come on our Skype channels or on RRC and discuss this question with us or ask on our forums. And hopefully people will come and help. And we'll try to answer as many questions as possible. It's obviously resources are limited at the moment.
And do you think long term for people who aren't programmers, there'll be
right.
some activity?
Yeah, absolutely. So you shouldn't have. Ethereum is, in my view, a bit like TCP/IP, right? Everybody, like my mother, goes and look at pictures of funny cats on Facebook all day long, but she doesn't understand that there's this thing called TCP/IP somewhere that's making this possible, right? Ethereum is a bit the same. In a sense, I'd like to have lots of people using Ethereum, but not necessarily knowing they're using it because they really don't have to. It's just an unnecessary complication. They just want to use something that gives them an immediate benefit. So it's going to be the apps, right? As part of our wallet client, we'll have, as I said, those distributed GUIs. Those distributed GUIs will be in a store or an app store, whatever you want to call it. Double click, install, I don't know, Ripple Gateway or a Mastercoin Gateway, or install a gambling game, and we can rate this application through reputation. So to make sure that those apps aren't malicious, we could have people rate them, for example. That kind of stuff. Yeah, that's the long-term plan is very simple, double-click to install your app, or DApp, I should say, and you don't have to be a programmer. There's already people, actually, funny enough, that have worked for years. I mean, this isn't, some of those concepts really aren't new. Contract as math, for example, that's existed for donkey's years. Yeah. There's a project out there, I forget the name, I think it's Project Actus, that lists all the types of contracts possible, and from a genetic algorithm type point of view, there's people who are actually already encoding in software standard escrow contracts and things like that that two parties can sign. They don't use blockchains, but you can tell these concepts are similar. So it's a matter of time till they take that code and put it on Ethereum and benefit from the added security.
And I think I saw on the forum someone was even talking about writing a science fiction novel to try and explain the possibilities of Ethereum into the future.
Yeah, it's his name escapes me now, but he's a famous author in Canada, Richard, I believe. He's another author I'd like to talk to potentially is Cory Doctorow, because it's reminiscent of that concept of Woofy as a reputation system, and I don't think it's been on a forum yet. I'm really looking forward to that day.
All right, so this is probably a little more technical question from Murray regarding if you think about the Bitcoin blockchain and its growth and growing faster and faster. He says it has to be downloaded in its entirety for the safer local wallets to operate. To minimize this overhead and make safer wallets accessible to new users, is it possible to introduce trusted snapshots verified at regular intervals?
All right. I don't know about trusted snapshots, so obviously that desires a more in-depth discussion. Sure. What I do know is that, yeah, absolutely right. So blockchain bloat is a problem with every single cryptocurrency. If you think about Bitcoin, that's running at a maximum now, potential maximum of 7 transactions per second. Ours is a little bit higher, I think around 600, but it's still nothing near, like say, the capacity of something like Visa, for example, which is 10,000 transactions per second on Christmas just for Visa, never mind the whole world, right? So if you were to be in a situation where you try to capture all those transactions in the Bitcoin-like system as a full node, what you'll find is you'll need extremely large super nodes, and then you can't mine anymore on this little laptop I'm looking at right now. And so who controls the super node? Well, it's probably going to be companies like Visa, right? So that's obviously not something that we're looking forward to. Instead, so there's various approaches that we're taking to try to minimize this. And one of them is this idea of Ethereum being accounts-based rather than input and output-based. So to a certain extent, addresses points to accounts that have balances, and it may be possible to prune some of the information that's no longer required on some nodes and keep other nodes as archive nodes. They're not more powerful nodes, they're just archive nodes. In terms of the contracts themselves, the programs, while a bit like in C, you have pointers at various objects in memory, we'll have pointers to the code so that it's not duplicated Instead, it is one copy of, say, those 10 lines of code that used everywhere, and then there's 900 pointers going at it to try to reduce the size of that data. And there's research as well that we would like to conduct through our crypto research group that we're intending to start as well after the Ether sale to try to address those challenges. And those challenges, once addressed, are not going to help just us. It's going to help everyone.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely every single crypto out there.
Yeah, great. Thank you. What do you? This is a question from Matt here. What do you see as the way in which Ethereum? What would need to happen to allow commercial operations to run on Ethereum? So I guess thinking more about scale of a contract as opposed to individual ones.
All right. Well, I think there's no roadblocks whatsoever. Like if you think about, say, distributed eBay or decentralized eBay, somebody could create a decentralized eBay by writing the little auction engine and then have a connection to say an escrow service that already exists. They don't have to even rewrite it. They can use something that already exists if it's priced appropriately. They could talk to maybe a delivery tracking system as well. And boom, if you go with a pretty GUI, you get your decentralized eBay. I don't think there's any roadblock that prevents it in terms of scalability or speed.
Okay. One of the big questions that is key in there is reputation. What sort of models do you see happening in Ethereum for reputation, rankings, etc.?
Right. I think that's super interesting because it's going back to almost the initial idea behind things like proof of work created by Adam Back, where you would try to prevent forum spam or email spam by making it costly to send one of those messages. So if it's costly to create an identity, then you're not going to go run around and create 20 different profiles that upvote each other's on Reddit, for example. So that's a cool concept. Now, once you have this identity concept in place through things like proof of sacrifice, as popularized by Peter Todd from Mastercoin, you can then add on top of that this reputation system. So now your identity is incredibly valuable to you because not only it wasn't free, but on top of that, there's all the output of everything you've ever done. It's interesting. It's not just reputation. It also, think of currency as this meter that defines, what you're interested in, what your values are. And we could almost compare wallet, not as to who has the fattest one, so to speak, but more like, well, this is where I spend my money. I believe in those organizations. I believe maybe in green things, and maybe you don't agree with those ideas, and we could say, okay, and immediately know. As I said, very similar to this novel by Cory Doctorow. It's almost science fiction gone real, really.
Yeah, great. This is a question from John, which I think you may have kind of touched on earlier before, but he's talking about a business where people have to currently in the real world fill in forms, sign things, lodge it with a government authority in order to have some form of legitimacy. Do you see that it potentially being something that could be done down the track using Ethereum?
Yeah, so there's some things that are going to be very easily automated and others much less so, even though it's fun to theorize about, for example, the sale of a car, if the car had an immobilizer and stuff like that. The problem is you can always put the car in a truck.
Yeah.
Right. So, but on the other hand, for things like documents or things that are currently protected via DRM, then that's a no-brainer. Because you just replace the DRM scheme with a cryptographic public-private key scheme, and you can just put it on Ethereum and have it fully automated there.
I'll have to edit that out for us later on, Stephan.
I think I'll have to cut that, and that'll be a great conspiracy theory. Then.
Right.
Why did you cut this bit out?
Yeah, what was he saying there? We'll have to leave it in now. So I guess I've got two more questions here. One you've kind of touched on a couple of times is what are the more interesting theoretical ideas that people have put out there for using Ethereum that you've heard?
Well, there's a big difference between interesting and pragmatic. the one I really, really liked, and I don't think it's very pragmatic, but it's an interesting concept where, we understand as societies the value of our natural resources. We can almost put a sticker on it that says this is worth $1 million or $10 million. Maybe this river brings fish and shipping lanes, or maybe this group of whale brings tourism and whatever else, biodiversity. So you could map a DAC to one of those natural resources and have them play as part of the economic landscape. And if they were to be injured or somehow damaged in one way or another, the people would have to actually pay to compensate, and that money could go towards maybe cleaning up the river or saving the whales. So I think that was a pretty far out concept, but still quite interesting. There's other concepts out there. There's a really cool project by the guy from CubeSpawn, which has the economy of the cubes. They're like self-replicating cubes that create more cubes, and then once they have a certain number of cubes, they can build bigger objects and so on. So it's quite an interesting project in that regard. But by integrating Ethereum within these cubes, they can act in a decentralized way and say, notice that they're running low on aluminum and order some more. And so if any of those actors just sort of disappears, it doesn't really matter because there's always like all those other cubes running around doing their thing, and the economy keeps on going. I thought that was a really cool, currently left field, never expected to see that type project.
Great. And the final question, I guess there'll be some people listening tonight who will be thinking, well, I want to get involved, and how best do I get involved in something like this? Obviously, it's still forming and growing and shaping, but what advice, suggestions do you have for people who are interested in taking their interest further?
Yeah, so as you said, it's early days. So at the moment, the code base is it's bleeding edge. And you know what they say about bleeding edge? Those on the bleeding edge bleed a lot. But if you're into this sort of fun stuff, then please, by all means, go and look at our GitHub repos. GitHub.com/Ethereum. Everything in Ethereum is open source. So absolutely everything, from the website to the clients, absolutely everything is open source. So come and have a look, submit pull requests. We're pretty good at integrating them. If you'd rather write contracts, then definitely download one of those contract simulators or one of our clients and play with it and try to write a contract. Say if you like Lisp, there's this language called LLL, which is baked in LF0, the C++ client implementation. And then if you prefer maybe things like Python, we also have a compiler for a Python-like language called HLL that compiles down into EVM code, which is a machine language that ultimately is run on the Ethereum network by the virtual machines. So that's also a cool, fun project if you're a developer. If you're not a developer but you still like to participate, I think the meetups are really cool. It's great fun to get people to connect with each other and hear their ideas. And putting in touch developers with entrepreneurs, with investors, and who knows, maybe your town will be the one with the Facebook for Ethereum where it'll be developed. So yeah, I think these are the main ways.
Terrific. All right. Well, thank you, Stephan. We really appreciate having you spend a bit of time with us, and
thank you.
Potentially at some point, maybe you or someone else from Ethereum is visiting Australia, we'll welcome you to one of our meetups in person.
Well, that would be brilliant. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you.
Cheers.